I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
Golden Spiral Media presents the Friday the 13th rewatch.
Jason, Mother is talking to you.
Join Cory and Nathan each week as they slash their way through campgrounds, woods, Manhattan, hell, and space as they discuss another installment in the Friday the 13th franchise.
Hey, wasn't that the road up for Camp Crystal Lake back there?
Send us your feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/rewatch podcast. And follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod.
Legend has it that Jason came back to get even. Every now and then, the murders just start up.
Today we're discussing Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6, starring Tom Matthews, Jennifer Cook, David Kagan, Kerry Noonan, Renee Jones, and Tom Fridley, with C.J. Graham as Jason. Directed by Tom McLaughlin. Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Cory, and he's back! He's the man behind the mask, and he's out of control. He's back! The man behind the mask, and he crawled out of his hole.
That was awesome, buddy. Seriously, that's like top 10 material right there. You did very well. And I'm Nathan, and let's play another game. It's called Camp Blood. Ooh, I know. When will people learn to stop playing Camp Blood?
That's what you get when you go to Camp Blood.
I know. Hello, Cory. How are you, mate?
I'm awesome. A little bit fluey today, so I've got that baritone going on. Didn't affect my singing voice, though. I rock that.
Hey, we're here to talk about Friday the 13th, Part 6. What year is it? It's 1986.
Yes, and we'll get into when the actual film is set. But before we do anything, of course, as always, we do want to remind everybody that we are part of the Golden Spiral Media Podcast Network. You can send us your feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback, or you can type a message, or use the SpeakPipe widget to record your own voice, or you could even call 304-837-2278. We'd love to hear from you. And also head over to Facebook. Facebook.com/Golden Spiral Media, and follow on Twitter at GSM Podcasts. It's always great to have you involved.
Absolutely. Get involved. It helps the show to kind of, jump on iTunes and do all kinds of things. So anything that our listeners can do is appreciated. We love having you here, and we love you to kind of get involved with the show. It's more fun for us.
All right, Nathan. Well, shall we check out the trailer?
I can't wait to check out the trailer. Seriously, I'm just bated breath.
Let's do it.
I'm sorry about what happened to you and your folks years ago, but no one in Forest Green wants to be reminded of what that maniac did here. That's why we changed the name. People want to forget this was Crystal Lake. They don't need some kid stirring up Jason shit again. Now you just lie down and get some rest.
I'm really sorry you didn't listen to me.
You're gonna be sorry if you don't shut up.
All right, welcome back. The full title is Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6. It came out on August 1st, 1986. It had a budget of $3 million, and it went on to grow somewhere in the vicinity of 18 million and 19.4 million domestically in the US. So this was the start of the decline in box office returns. This is probably the weakest performing out of all of them. But in saying that, though, it still made money. I don't think the producers would have been that unhappy.
Definitely a decline there. But this, Part 6 is a bit of an odd duck in this series, because a lot of people love this one, and we will get into it as we discuss, but there is a significant change in the killer, which they're very proud of. given that the title of the movie is called Jason Lives. And, it really changed up. Although numbers have gone down in box office, a lot of people really, really like it. So we'll get into it as we discuss it.
But I think the filmmakers definitely take a bit of a different tact. It's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, I found, which I thought was quite an interesting change. Like, especially considering like the last film, number five, the one where they were at the halfway house and Tommy is kind of like a brooding kind of teenager, and as in not just slightly brooding, like mega brooding teenager. Like, he's super cranky with the world and he cannot get over the whole Jason, him killing Jason in number 4 and all that, him as a little kid. They kind of show up in this one and it's a completely new setup. In fact, a bit of a spoiler alert, sorry to kind of spoil it, everyone, but they kind of disregard the ending of the previous film, don't they?
A little bit. I think you could smoothly move between part 4 and this movie and just act like part 5. Like, just never happened. And of course, they're changing up the Tommy character. Again, new actor, new characterization. So it's very different.
Before we go too far, I just kind of want to talk about box office for a little bit, because this is what I normally do. I forgot to do it. As we said before, the film opened on August 1st, and it's actually pretty interesting read, the films that it opened up against. August 1st, 1986, the other films that opened on that weekend was Howard the Duck and Flight of the Navigator was there too. Other films that were in the box office at the moment was stuff like Top Gun was in its 12th week of release. Aliens, the sequel to Alien, the James Cameron film, was in its 3rd week of release. Rodney Dangerfield's Back to School was there. Ferris Bueller, Running Scared, Legal Eagles. So, as always, a fairly quality list of what is considered now to be, I don't know about classics, but certainly a good portion of them are good classics. But the fact that Friday the 13th decided to open up against Howard the Duck, correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, I really don't know too much about Howard the Duck at the time, but that was a reasonably, like people were anticipating that film, yeah?
Well, it's Marvel. It was George Lucas directing. But, for a George Lucas film, it was a flop.
I don't think he directed it. I could be wrong. Do you think he did?
I think he did.
Oh, I'm going to check that one out right now, because I've never thought. I knew he produced it, and I think he wrote it. No, he didn't. It was a guy named Willard Hayek.
He must have produced it then.
I know that he had like a really significant hand in the creation of the film, didn't he?
But it was a flop. I think over time it's become sort of, a cult classic.
But as I said, it opened up on August 1st, Friday the 13th. It made $6.7 million in its opening weekend. It more than made its budget back. In the second weekend, it had a bit of a drop off though. It only made $3.5 million. And that weekend, Transformers, the movie, opened up. Stand By Me, Rob Reiner's film, opened up as well. And another film called One Crazy Summer and a Fine Mess, which I don't really know too much about. But as per usual, some very stiff kind of competition, yeah?
It's going to be tough, going up against a lot of original content like that, Ferris Bueller's especially, it's John Hughes. He was well established for his style and genre, so people would have been clamoring to see that. Legal Eagles, Flight of the Navigator, it's just all original stuff, And of course, the hotly anticipated sequel to Alien. You can see why this one was probably a little further down the line. Who wants to go and see part 6 of Friday the 13th?
Karate Kid 2 was out at the time too, man. I was actually looking at the box office there. It was like in its 3rd or 4th week of release, and it made $83 million. I didn't realize how successful that film was. I always kind of thought Karate Kid 2 was a bit of a poor cousin to the first one, if you know what I mean. But it sounded like it did quite well at the box office. People loved that movie.
Yeah, it was the direct sequel, and we can look back at it in hindsight.
But you're dead right. Back to Friday the 13th. This is the 3rd film in a row where the character of Tommy was played by a different character. Obviously, in part 4, it was played by Corey Feldman. Part 5 was played by John Shepherd. And in number 6, it was played by Tom Matthews. And now Tom Matthews was someone that looked kind of familiar to me. He's certainly not a name actor, but I bet you know who he is. Is that right?
I've got no idea.
Well, he was in Return of the Living Dead.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, he was in the first Return of the Living Dead, and then he was in the sequel, Return of the Living Dead Part 2.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I looked at him and thought there was something about his face. You're right, I didn't know his name. He wasn't like a megastar or anything, but he just had that familiarity to me a little bit. He looked very 80s, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. And let's just say, he was miles above John Shepherd from the last movie, who was offered the chance to come back to play Tommy again. But apparently he had become a born-again Christian.
I know, and he screwed over his co-star because apparently the other girl...
It was Pam.
Anyway, she was scheduled to kind of come back, but when John Shepherd decided not to come back as Tommy, he kind of screwed over her deal because they actually decided to eliminate that storyline because they didn't want the previous character to come back and play opposite somebody that she didn't recognize. They thought it would kind of be strange and weird.
Oh, I mean, come on, it's Friday the 13th, part 6. But the thing is that they brought in Tom McLaughlin, and he takes this in a completely different direction. He wrote the film as well.
And I actually think he did a fairly reasonable job. Now, I actually looked at his kind of filmography of what he did after this film, and he made a bunch, like a ton of movies over the years. He's had like 40 credits to his name, with his last one made in 2010. He's still alive, but he's made a lot of kind of B-grade-y, kind of schlocky kind of TV movies. And I don't think he really went on to make too many more like significant feature films like most of the Friday the 13th directors. None of them kind of went on to really do anything of all that profound. That this one back in 1986 was his probably more major kind of effort. But the thing that I found very interesting, and I should have been thinking about it when I watched the film, I didn't know this when I was watching, without giving too much away, but at the start of the film we meet our hero Tommy, and he goes to a grave, and he goes to Jason's grave, and he digs up the grave with his friend, right? For some reason he's convinced he's not dead, so he has this like metal kind of lightning rod, and he kind of stabs him with it. They go away to do something, and there's this bad storm, and lightning strikes this lightning rod that is attached to Jason Voorhees, and Jason Voorhees comes alive. Now, apparently when Tom McLaughlin was writing this film, he decided to take the film in the direction of the old Universal monster movies, specifically the 1931 version of Frankenstein. And to be truthful, Cory, I didn't even really think of that when I was watching it.
Really?
Part of me was kind of snickering a little bit when it all kind of happened. But when I kind of put two and two together about the whole Frankenstein thing, it made perfect sense. I actually kind of liked it. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's sort of like expanding the mythos of Jason. And I think the way that McLaughlin ends up describing it in this film is more that Jason has been dead the whole time, that he actually did drown in the lake and came back. So he's always kind of had this sort of supernatural undead force behind him. And it's just more apparent in this movie because he's been buried in a coffin for however long. And he's, starting to look a bit decrepit. So, yeah, this whole undead zombie thing becomes very much pronounced in this film. And I like it, He's not just a serial killer anymore. He's also a zombie.
I like the fact that you know that he's fucked up looking underneath that mask. And I'm fairly certain that did he take off the mask in this film? I don't think he did he?
Well, he started with the mask off. For some reason, Tommy, brought a mask with him to kill him over again. So he has a mask to put on, yeah.
Now, another thing that I kind of wanted to chat about as well is apparently there was a fairly interesting storyline that was originally scheduled for this film but was cut for whatever reason regarding who Jason's father was. Now, apparently it was in the script. They were meant to shoot it, but it got cut for whatever reason. But there's a novelization of Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, which is written by Simon Hawke in 1986. And notably, the novelization features an appearance by Jason's father, who is called Elias Voorhees. The book also includes various flashbacks to Jason's childhood, and the backstories of characters such as Tommy and Sheriff Garris are also expanded. Now, that's quite interesting. I've never really thought about Jason's dad before. What about you?
No, I haven't either. It's something I've kind of heard about, over the years, just knowing the Friday the 13th films and sort of doing my own independent research. I've heard talks of this Elias Voorhees character, but it wasn't until really looking into this film that I saw that it mostly comes from deleted excerpts of this script and then what ended up in the novelization of this film. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting that they were going to expand that.
So, would you call that book canon? Is that part of the mythology that is Jason and Friday the 13th?
I'm not sure. If I remember correctly, they're going to get into a little bit more of the Voorhees family when we get to part 9.
Nice.
So I guess once we get to there and find out what they talk about there, then we can sort of make a definitive decision on whether or not that's canon.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll get there once we get to film 9. We're up to film 6, dude. There's 12 in total, right? Is that right?
That's right.
That's assuming they don't reboot it, which they probably will. I know that there's been talk about doing it recently, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if they make another Jason film at some point.
I know, there's got to be one on the books. I know that they've been wanting to make one. It's sort of been on and off and on and off again, so it'll get made someday. I also love this bit of trivia too. There was this whole thing about, there was an interview or something, or a meeting that happened between Kevin Williamson and the director of this film, Tom McLaughlin. Now, yeah, Kevin Williamson, of course, wrote Scream, and apparently during this meeting, he actually told Tom McLaughlin that it was this film, Part 6, that had like a major influence on him, which I think is interesting because if you watch Scream, the very beginning with Drew Barrymore, she's being tested, she's being quizzed on horror movie trivia, right? And I think the question that the killer on the phone asks her is, name the killer in Friday the 13th, to which she answers Jason. And that's a wrong answer because the killer in the first one was Jason's mother.
That's right, it's Pamela. I really like the fact that Kevin actually made that kind of known very loudly that this film was a huge influence on him. Because, I mean, I think we were talking kind of off mic prior to the podcast starting, and I was saying to Cory that how much I thought this film was actually kind of okay. Like, it's certainly not awful. Part of the reason why I like it is that it's quite kind of referential to other horror films. Like, it wears its heart on its sleeve a little bit. I like the small town mentality. The performances are fairly good, and you actually, for the first time in many a Friday the 13th film, you actually get to know some of the characters, as in, like, genuinely get to know them, like a little bit, certainly more than a 3-minute introduction and then Jason shows up and chops his head off, which is pretty much what the 5th film was. Didn't we say something about there was one kill every 8 minutes or something stupid like that? Like, they really went out of their way to kill all the characters. But something that I did find very interesting in the writing of this film, because the film contains numerous references to other horror films and or people connected with them. Apparently Megan mentions Cunningham Road, which is a reference to Sean S. Cunningham, director of the original Friday the 13th and creator of the series. Tommy mentions a grocery store called Karloff's, which is an homage to famous horror actor Boris Karloff, as well as Sheriff Garris mentions a town called Carpenter, which is a reference to filmmaker John Carpenter, of course, director of Halloween, while the name Sissy is actually a reference, well, perhaps a reference, they think, to Sissy Spacek, who actually starred in Brian De Palma's Carrie film, which is based on the novel by Stephen King. Now, also, Sissy wears a jacket with the name Baker on the back, which is possibly a reference to Angela Baker from the horror film Sleepaway Camp, which I'm not too familiar with. You probably are more familiar with than I am.
I've seen all 3 of them.
I loved all those little, and I caught them too. This is before doing my trivia and before knowing about it. I caught the whole Karloff thing and Carpenter thing and Sissy, and I thought all this when I was watching it, and I thought it's just wonderful little like Easter eggs in the film. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's exactly what Scream is. Scream is satire, and I think this film is just all about the satire. It's not taking itself too seriously. I mean, they're literally bringing Jason back from the dead, and they are paying respects to the filmmakers who kind of pioneered the way through, which I think is deserved for a film that's on its Part 6.
Something else that kind of caught my eye was Jason was actually played by someone totally different at the very start of the film, and is actually appears on screen momentarily, but was fired like a day or two into shooting because one of the producers or something like that felt that he was too bulky for the role, and they actually gave the role to CJ Graham. And you know what? I actually did pick up on that a little bit when I found that bit of trivia out, because he shows up right at the start of the film, and he looks a bit bigger, and then Jason shows up a bit later, and he's certainly a bit slightly trimmer and probably a little bit more agile than kind of what he was, but it would have been pretty irritating playing him first and then kind of getting the axe straight away, yeah?
Let's put a tack in this subject for now and revisit it next week.
Nice.
Because I think we'll have something to say about it then.
The last bit of the trivia that I actually want to bring up is, and again, we're talking about like Easter eggs and kind of little bits of, references to previous kind of things. But during the close-up of the shots of the children sleeping in the cabin, one of them is actually holding a book called No Exit by this author Jean-Paul Sartre, which is a French existentialist. Now, I didn't know anything about this prior to reading the trivia, but when that book showed up, I thought it was a bit strange. It's like, what is this 6 or 7 or 8-year-old kid reading this like really heavy kind of French book? And it turns out that this is most likely intended as a joke. The book's plot of No Exit is about 3 deceased souls who are brought to hell and lie about their reasons for being brought there. And after being stuck there and failing to find a way out, one of the characters comes to the conclusion that hell is other people. So it's like this really intense kind of thinking man's book that this 10-year-old is reading as nighttime reading just before they go to sleep. It's hilarious. It's really funny.
It is really good. You know, I've never actually read No Exit, but I know of it and what it's about because there was this sketch which was done on an old British sketch show called Not the 9 O'Clock News. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, it's got Rowan Atkinson in it.
All right. Is there anything else that you kind of want to discuss about trivia?
No, let's get into it.
Let's do it. Let's get into our main discussion.
So I guess beginning with the timeline of this, we are now leaping forward a full year from the last film, and it is now the 90s. It's 1990, apparently, when this film is set. And, yeah, like I said, directly 1 year after the events of the last film. And Tommy's kind of on the mend, I guess, you know, sort of coming to terms with these demons. He's at least a lot more talkative.
Yeah, he kind of just seems like a normal young adult. I mean, they don't really give you much indication about exactly how old it is, but you kind of make the assumption he's probably early to mid-20s, maybe, but he's certainly come a long way since number 5. I mean, number 5, he was a disturbed, non-talking man that couldn't emotionally deal with the events that happened in the past, and he kept having like hallucinations, and they certainly indicated at the end of the previous film that Tommy was going to evolve into being the next Jason and probably potentially be Jason in this film. And now when I watched this movie, I didn't do any reading about it. I actually expected Tommy to be Jason. So it actually caught me a little off guard that Tommy was like this normal character that just wanted to do whatever. And he certainly didn't feel like the same character as the previous film.
Instead, in this one, they give him a buddy that he has escaped whatever institution they were in at this point. And he is going to destroy his demons once and for all. He's going to go and cremate Jason.
Yeah.
He's going to set the dude on fire and be done with him for good. And he feels that this will help him overcome hallucinations he's been having. So I guess that's kind of how they deal with the ending of the last film, is that he didn't really attack Pam. He just sort of hallucinated that he did.
Yeah. And I quite like that scene too, because his friend Alan is endlessly saying to Tommy, I don't like this man. I don't like this man. This doesn't feel good to me. I wish we wouldn't do this. But for whatever reason, Tommy just like totally just wants to dig up Jason's body, and which is just a bad idea. Like, just leave him in the ground, man. Or if you're going to do anything, just like set fire to it or do something. Like, don't open up the casket and have it like look him in the eye and all that kind of stuff. And I thought they did a pretty good job with the makeup, actually. He looks disgusting underneath that coffin, yeah?
Yeah, it's gross with all the maggots and stuff going in.
It's super gross, man. It's really not very nice. And then as soon as he opens the coffin, you know something terrible is going to happen, don't you?
Exactly. Now, did you recognize this guy playing Alan, the friend?
Maybe, but I don't remember putting 2 and 2 together. Like, obviously, you know.
Well, this guy's from an old TV show called Welcome Back, Kotter, if you remember that, with John Travolta.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the TV show, but I don't recall this character in particular.
The actor's name is Ron Palillo, and he played Horshack.
Oh, interesting.
And he was the one who would always have like a note from his mother for reasons why he didn't do schoolwork or couldn't do something or something like that, and be like, please excuse Horshack from gym today because he's got a bad knee. Signed, Horshack's mother. That's this guy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you're right. He's there to get killed by Jason.
But he would have been fresh off Welcome Back, Kotter when he was making this film. I mean, this is 1985, and Welcome Back, Kotter, that was 75 to 79. So yeah, that was well past this. In fact, I'm just looking at his biography at the moment. Welcome Back, Kotter in 75 to 79. He was in a film called Snaketown, USA. USA. Have you ever heard of Skate Town, USA in 1979? The Love Boat, Laverne and Shirley in the Army. I didn't even know that was a TV show. Mork and Mindy, all kinds of things. So he's kind of been around a bit, hasn't he?
Yeah, they just pulled him out of sitcom acting and gave him this bit part in Friday the 13th, part 6.
So we've got Alan and Tommy. They're at the grave. They dig up Jason's grave. They stick the metal rod through Jason for whatever reason. And then they I can't remember exactly what happens, but you're right. There's a big storm and lightning strikes the metal rod. And before you know it, Jason is out of the grave looking disgusting as always, yeah?
Yeah, he opens his eyes. And like I said in the trivia, for no reason, Tommy has also carted along a hockey mask with him to, I don't know, I guess cremate with the body. There's that there. So Jason has a hockey mask to put on. He also steals a pair of gloves. I don't know if you noticed that, but Tommy also had a pair of gloves with him. So I guess it's like so they can save on the makeup or something. They don't have to put like decrepit hands on him.
Fair enough.
He just puts these gloves on. So he's got gloves, he's got the hockey mask on now, and he's back. And he just immediately just kills Alan.
I'm fairly certain later in the film, Jason changes clothes as well. Like all of a sudden he's in like nice new clothes, or maybe not nice new, but I kind of got the impression he killed someone, took their clothes and put them on, which I thought was a really strange thing for Jason to do, considering he's this supernatural being that shouldn't care about the stuff. Like it actually shows that Jason's maybe slightly vain, which is not impossible.
Well, we're going to get into this whole paintball thing, and he gets hit with paintballs, and that, you know, that paint doesn't stick around, so possibly maybe he did change clothes.
So we have this kind of situation where the two lightning bolts strike Jason, who's alive all of a sudden, and Tommy makes his way to the sheriff office where he's in a total A-grade panic. And he actually attempts to like grab some kind of weapons, but is actually caught and arrested by the local sheriff, played by a guy named David Kagan. Now, I thought this guy was pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. This is one of a few things that they're going to change up for the series, right? For starters, Jason is now an undead zombie. That's number one. Number two, an adult authority figure. This never happens. I think outside of maybe Tommy's mother, who was, I guess, sort of ambiguously killed pretty early on, we haven't really had an adult authority figure in any of these movies. And he sticks around for a long time.
Yeah. Like, he is not killed off in 8 minutes. He's there for 65 minutes of the 80-minute running time, yeah?
Exactly. So, and we get to know him and his daughter.
And we also kind of get to know the offsider and the fact that this guy cares about the town, and they keep trying to bring up the whole Camp Crystal Lake thing to him because we haven't really mentioned this, but they've actually done a rename of the town so they can escape the terrible past that Jason has kind of inflicted on them and their psyche and their reputation as like a tourist destination. So they're not called Camp Crystal Lake anymore. They're called Camp Forest Green or whatever the name of the actual local town is concerned. They're desperately trying to escape the shadow of the terrible events that have actually occurred there over the years. And the thing that I found interesting is that Mike Garris is actually very aware of who Tommy is and the mental problems that he's actually been associated with. And Tommy shows up and he tries to kind of grab some kind of weapon, but he's actually caught and arrested. And he's actually warning that Jason has actually returned goes terribly ignored by the sheriff, doesn't it? Like he really doesn't want to really listen to this guy because he knows that Tommy's a bit nuts, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. He is actively working towards, let's get this town out of the shadow of Crystal Lake and try to drive maybe some tourism or something back to Forest Green. And that's actively happening. They are reopening the camp.
So we have our Tommy character who is behind bars. We actually don't really get back to him till a little bit later on in the film because this is when we meet our, you guessed it guys, camp counselors.
Yeah, they're all at the station, one of which is Sheriff Garris's own daughter called Megan. And yeah, they kind of encounter Tommy as well, and she's kind of taken with them a little bit. You know, I guess that kind of, you know, I may be daddy's little girl, but ooh, here's this bad boy. And she's flirting with him.
Exactly. So we've got Garris's daughter, Megan, and she's got some friends, Sissy, Court, and Paula. And they actually meet Darren and Lisbeth. They actually get lost looking for the camp. And they actually run into Jason, who actually impales them both with the metal rod that actually resurrected him. So actually used the rod that resurrected him as a weapon on other people.
This is a good scene, actually, you know, because as much as we've got Garris as, you know, a main character here, we still need to get rid of the main I guess, adults who are running the camp. And that's Darren and Lisbeth.
Something that I kind of found interesting in this film too is that this is the film that has, I think there's 19 kills, so it's quite a lot of dead bodies in this film. It's certainly one of the higher counts for the Friday the 13th film, but this is the only film in the whole series, apparently, that doesn't have any nudity, and I think the film's better off for it.
Well, we were saying about the last film, how it was directed by a guy who came out of porn, so you could understand why he was upping the nudity. But this film, I don't think it needs it. We've always said from the get-go, you come into this one for the thrill of the kill, and that's what this film is. It doesn't need boobies and stuff for no reason.
Something that I was actually thinking about when I was watching it is I thought Jason's presence was quite imposing in this film, probably more imposing than the previous films. Like, he was a nasty kind of guy that didn't really stop at anything. Like, I know it's a bit silly saying that because we've had 5 films where he's kind of done that exact kind of thing, but for some reason, I thought the way he was portrayed by the actor and the way he was directed and the scares that they were kind of going for, he was a lot, I don't know, just his physique and the way he kind of presented himself was quite commanding.
And I think that's what's set up here with this kill scene of Darren and Lisbeth, right? Is that he's standing in the middle of the road, they see him there, and they're still going to go with that tongue-in-cheek thing where Lisbeth is like, I've seen enough horror films to know that a guy in a mask is never a good guy. They try to run him down. He doesn't move.
Don't they try and reverse or something like that?
Yeah, they try to back it up. They get stuck in the mud. And then he is just ruthless. He just, kills Darren. Elizabeth is, shrieking, trying to give him money and stuff to leave her alone. She looks up. He's not there. Bang, he's right behind her. And he just, slams that pole down in her face while she's, she's in that muddy puddle or something. Very interesting visuals. They're working with all this horror movie kill stuff, but they're still keeping that tongue-in-cheek kind of fun about it too, and it's all meshing together very well.
But it's very funny. It's legitimately funny as well. It's really, as much as it does take the kill seriously and Jason seriously, there's a lot of comedy in the drama that's surrounding Jason and all that kind of stuff. Like, for example, after he kills Darren and Lisbeth, Tommy actually warns everyone about Jason, but they don't really believe him. They actually just consider him to be an urban legend. But Jason finds himself in the woods and he's wandering around, and out of nowhere, he wanders upon this corporate game of paintball that is clearly paid by financial types, very much like an office kind of type people, yeah?
Yeah, this is interesting, Again, it's going back to that last film where they were insisting that the director introduce new characters every 8 or so minutes just to be killed. But unlike that last one where it was hey, look, I'm in this movie, bang, I'm dead. This one, he at least attempted to tell a bit of a story.
Yeah.
Before having these people killed. Sure, they're there just to be killed, but at least, we've got this whole story of, office retreat, paintball playing, and you understand it. There's the guy who hates the woman because she's always killing everybody. And
I think the film is allowed to breathe a little bit, because even though we've got the same give or take amount of kills that the previous film has, the kills come like Jason will kill 3 or 4 people in the space of 2 minutes in this film, where the previous film in number 5, it was, as we said, it was one film every 6, 7, 8 minutes, whatever it might have been, and you never really got to know everyone. So at least this film, they give you that extra time to get to know these people before Jason catches up with them. Of course, let's be truthful for a second, he's always going to catch up with them, isn't he? He does. That's his MO. That's exactly what he does.
I know. This is the one where people sprint in the opposite direction of Jason, and he sort of just lumbers after them at a moderate pace and still catches up to them.
Well, that's just something that I found interesting, is that because of his supernatural kind of tendencies and zombie-like, universal monster kind of vibe that he's kind of got going on now, Jason doesn't really realize his own strength, and he discovers it during this paintball game where he's killing these people, and he realizes that he's actually far stronger than he was when he previously was alive a few years ago, whatever it might have been, where he actually rips off a man's arm without actually meaning to. So that just goes to show that Jason is this forever kind of imposing presence over this film. And I think they should even try and shoot him several times, but the bullets do nothing, don't they?
Not to mention this whole scene with the paintball game also serves to get a machete back in Jason's hands. It's not only giving you the gore in a pretty well done manner, it's also serving purpose of the plot to sort of get our iconic killer back to form.
Should we say a freshly sharpened machete?
I know, it wasn't that rusty old thing that he was carrying around before. He's got a nice fresh one now.
Something that this film does that the previous films don't, and I don't think any of the subsequent ones do, at the camp, they actually introduce children, as in little kids, like about 50 of them, a big busload of them arrive.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was all about getting the camp ready. The second one was like a training camp for the counselors. So yeah, this is the first time we actually have an active open camp with children around.
It does add an extra layer of tension to the scenario because you've got these counselors and these teenagers who are there and they're doing their best to try and take care of Camp Forest Green, but the reality is the bosses of the camp, which is Darren and Elizabeth, they got killed, so they're not around anymore. So all of a sudden you've got these teenagers doing their best to try and, or not teenagers, young adults I should say, doing their best to try and run the camp with these little kids, but they're kind of at a bit of a loss, aren't they? Because they don't have enough people to run the camp, do they?
They don't really have any direction they're taking. They're kind of just sort of like, well, the kids are here, so we've got to deal with it. And then while all this is going on, Garrus is trying to figure out what to do with Tommy, right? And I think he was going to call the institution or something, have them come pick him up, but I think he kind of cuts him some slack a little bit and says, look, I'm going to follow you out of town and make sure you leave. But of course, Tommy veers off to go to the cemetery so we can try and prove that he dug up Jason. But there's this creepy old caretaker there.
Yeah, that's right.
Who thinks he's going to get fired or something.
Does he say something like, I went to school, I got a degree, I earned this job, or something like that?
So he kind of just covers it back up. He just assumes there's a body, like Jason's body's in there because like the leg's hanging out, but of course, we know that's our old mate Alan.
That's your welcome back Cotter guy right there.
But he's just like, I ain't touching the slimy sucker. I'm just going to cover Jason back up. Why are you messing with Jason?
And he's really got the shits, doesn't he? Like, he keeps saying stuff like, I can't believe people think this is fun and all that kind of stuff. And like making all these like little lewd remarks, doesn't he?
Yeah, so again, like the police aren't going to believe what Tommy's saying now because he can't prove that Jason was dug up. And again, he still finds himself in the jail cell, you know, he still hasn't been run out of town. So I don't know, it's interesting that they keep Tommy locked up for so long, but it never really kind of feels like he's very inactive in the film or its plot.
He's not inactive at all. And as we said before, he disappears for a little bit because you've got to establish, you know, Jason kind of killing people with Darren and Elizabeth and the young adults at the camp and the kids and all that. You've got to set all that up. That's ready to go. But after Tommy goes out to the grave and realizes that the caretaker has covered it up, the Sheriff Garrus, has finally got the shits and said, enough is enough. And he says, I don't care who you are. I just want you out of my town. And he actually drives Tommy to the border of his jurisdiction. It's all about jurisdiction in these films. Like, seriously, I think you can have a drinking game, you know, based on the word jurisdiction in these films. It's just crazy. So they actually escort Tommy to the edge of town, and that kind of pisses off the daughter, doesn't it? Because the daughter clearly has a thing for Tommy, yeah?
And of course, Tommy's not going to leave. And of course, it's going to be nightfall, and this is where stuff's going to start happening. But before we get into that, shall we check out some clips from the first half?
Let's do some clips.
All right, so this first one is our good friend Alan Monpalillo.
Okay, there it is, huh? There's his grave. Okay, let's go.
He really just did not want to be there.
Oh, and you know what? Rightly so, man. He was the audience. Like, seriously, he's almost like the eyes and ears and the voice of the audience during that sequence, because you've got Tommy showing up and he's digging up the grave, and everyone in the audience is just going, "Why? Why are you doing that? What a terrible idea!" And Alan is the voice of the audience, just going, "I don't like this, man. Please, we got to go. This is a terrible idea."
The next clip here, I don't know, this whole delivery of when Tommy actually gets thrown into the jail cell. I don't know, I captured this whole thing. It's about 20 seconds long, but I don't know, this line delivery, it's a bit weird.
Now that's what's known in the books as screwing the pooch. Iron this punk.
No way, you gotta listen to me. Jason's coming here, he's after me. I tried to destroy him, but I fucked up.
You got that right, punk.
I don't know, it was just something weird about that. I tried to destroy him, but I fucked up.
Talking about this supernatural presence that's roaming the town, really killing people.
And then, we've got Darren and Lisbeth.
Nice.
Encountering Jason.
We're gonna scare him.
We're gonna scare him.
That's right. Just drive towards him, he'll move.
Nobody wants to die.
Well, that's a freaking fact, least of all us.
Will you just drive?
I thought that was a funny line.
I can't believe they actually think they're going to win that situation. I mean, they're driving along and there's this man with a machete. Like, in hindsight, they probably should have driven through Jason, not back. They should have just sped up. Yeah, but I suppose you don't really want to do that, do you?
Exactly. And that's the humor of it too. He says, he'll get out of the way. Nobody wants to die. Well, that's a freaking fact. Okay, I've got that, I've got that crazy caretaker.
Oh, nice.
Say old Martin ain't a good caretaker. Hell, I'm a damn high school graduate. I deserve this job. I earned it.
It's so good, isn't it?
I'm a goddamn high school graduate.
Yeah, but he's playing it for truth. Like, he really believes that. Like, even though we're meant to giggle, his character really believes that he deserves that job. He's a high school graduate, you know, and he's meant to be there. Crazy.
This is Sheriff Garris when he realizes that Tommy is not going to leave town.
Fucking A, what did I tell you? It's the noise in the cherries.
Hit the noise on the cherries. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
I don't even know what that means. Hit the noise on the cherries. That's crazy.
I think it's supposed to be turn on the siren, right? Because they're red.
Oh, okay, nice.
Hit the noise on the cherries.
Makes sense. Yeah, totally.
And the last one before we move on. This is Court trying to teach the kids about Indians. So
oh, yeah.
Enjoy this.
Look, here's a story. These are called Indian markers, okay? Let's just say you have a chief, right? And he dumps his squaw or his wife or whatever, and he decides, hey, I'm going to pick up with another one. I'm going to take off with her. So he takes off, leaving his son with the mother, and all of a sudden, you know, a week or two later, the son wants to catch up with his dad, right? He wants to learn how to shoot a bow, stuff, you know, kill buffalo, whatever these guys do. So what happens is he comes along, sees the rock, says, Dad, hey, he went that way, obviously. And so what happens is he comes up, knocks them all down before the mother catches up, because he don't want to see any of her anymore. So, you know, pretty much that's the basic story. Tells you where they go.
Oh, my God.
He is so full of crap.
Such a total fool of shit. And he's a motor mouth, too. Just doesn't stop talking.
Why they ever hired him to work at the camp, I don't know.
It's just odd, isn't it?
So, I guess, speaking of Court, that's kind of where we go to next. He has, rather than sort of sticking around and doing his duties as a camp counselor, he takes off with his girlfriend Nikki and her Winnebago.
Yeah, they go across in the Winnebago. I kind of forgot about that. And they're getting busy in the back. And they go outside to, like, discover kind of, you know, investigate what's happening. Or that's right, the power goes from the van because it's rocking and they're having sex and she's on top of him and she's kind of like dancing at the same time. It's this really strange sequence, yeah?
Yeah, she's like doing it to the music and she kind of wants to get through the whole song and he's like, oh, how much longer we got? Well, you know, about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, that's right. And Court just looks like terrified at this moment, yeah. And then the power goes out and I think he finishes and she gets the shits. She's like, did you finish already? And he goes, well, what was I meant to do?
I thought it ended.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite funny.
But yeah, well, this is where they get into the satire and stuff too, because I think the two of them are actually quite smart at this moment in that Court goes out to investigate why the power went out. And you're like, okay, that's a bit cliche. He realizes that it's been cut. The power cable's been cut. And she's there. She's actually followed him out as well. And immediately they're like, oh, let's get out of here. Which is a very, you know, un-horror movie thing to do. It would usually be like, oh, the power's cut. Oh, let's try to find a phone or something. But no, they decided they're going to get out of there. But while they were both out of the Winnebago, Jason has snuck on board and hidden in the toilet.
And it's pretty creepy, actually, when he comes back because Court actually gets the van going and starts driving. And she goes to the loo or she gets lured in there somehow. And Jason is throwing her around and doing all kinds of terrible things in the bathroom. And isn't the music turned all the way up and Court can't hear what's going on in the bathroom? Is that right?
Exactly. This is where we get that awesome Alice Cooper song, Man Behind the Mask. And, or, you know, in case we were missing a scene of somebody on the toilet in this movie, I guess it's not really somebody on the toilet, but he does give a shout out to like, hey, what are you doing in there? You taking a dump?
Something like that.
They're obsessed, man.
And you actually have this reasonably well-staged action sequence where the van crashes and kind of erupts into flames. And I thought it was actually quite well done, yeah?
Yeah, it was very well done, this whole Winnebago crash. And the visual of Jason climbing out of it, too.
Yeah.
And standing there I mean, that was really good. Very, very well done.
I thought it was kind of one of the better kills in the film. So he gets caught and his girlfriend Nikki, and the sheriff men show up and they find the bodies and they notify Garrus immediately, which somehow implicates Tommy in the murders, believing that he's actually gone insane, imagining Jason. And they actually assume that he's almost like copycatting Jason, if you know what I mean. So they assume Tommy's kind of involved somehow, but little do they know that he's actually nothing to do with it all. They're actually trying to stop this thing kind of going on. Now, Tommy then contacts Megan and convinces her to help him lure Jason back into Crystal Lake because somehow Tommy has all the answers, even though he's only had 2 confrontations with Jason. Like somehow he realizes like that he's actually from the lake, and I can't even remember what happens in number 4. Like, does that even get explained to Tommy that Jason is from the lake? Is that like a thing? Like, how do they know that?
I think like he reads some notes or some newspaper clippings or something in part 4, so he knows that Jason's from the lake. I always thought it was kind of like a weird leap of him to just be like, I know what I have to do. I have to return Jason to the lake. That's where he died, and that's what we're going to get him back to, which is fine. But there is like all of like 10-second shot after he's been left outside of town by the sheriff. He goes and picks up like some books or something from a shop. I guess like some sort of like mythology books or something like that. And he's flicking through them. And I guess that's where he gets this idea of, like, if I return him to the lake.
To his resting place.
Yeah. I don't know. It makes sense, I guess.
Don't they also go to the shop too, and he says to Megan, like, I know how to get rid of Jason, but I need some supplies.
Which I guess, going by the ending, is like some chains and whatnot.
Exactly. So we've got Tommy and Megan together, and they've worked out this plan to lure Jason back into Crystal Lake. But meanwhile, Jason's actually making his way to the camp, and he actually kills Sissy and then Paula. If I remember rightly, he kills Sissy in a fairly brutal kind of way.
Doesn't he take her head off? Like
yeah.
He pulls her out of a window and like twists her head off.
Pretty full on, man. Like it's not for the faint of heart, is it?
I know. It also cracked me up too that like the 2 like main counselors were killed before they even got there. Court went off to have sex. Megan's messing around with Tommy. So there's only 2 people there looking after all these kids. And immediately Sissy gets her head ripped off.
Just going back in time just for a moment, what did you think of the kill with Nikki where her face got crushed against the RV wall? And there was another kill as well where they left like an imprint of like a smiley face or something like that.
It was like on a tree or something. That was a bit maybe too much tongue-in-cheek there.
It kind of pulled you out of the situation, didn't it?
And I think even as far as Sissy goes, I mean, like twisting her head off.
Yeah, it's a bit much, isn't it?
I know. That's not too bad as, you know, the smiley face or the face imprint in the camper, but
it does also kind of go back to the previous conversation that we had about Jason being like stronger than he was in the previous films. Like all of a sudden he can do these kind of things where previously he couldn't. So maybe it's not impossible that he could actually achieve these kind of kills. Like he's certainly a different beast than what he was in 2, 3, and 4. Anyway, but you're right. It is stretching the friendship slightly, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, I guess they kind of just keep going backwards and forwards because Tommy and Megan, I guess they start getting chased by the police. They figure out that Tommy's still in town and, you know, the cops kind of think it's funny that it's the sheriff's daughter and stuff. So Tommy's going to get thrown in jail. And then while that's happening, you've got the last person at the camp, Paula, sort of comforting one of the children who keeps seeing Jason walking around and saying, oh, there's this monster.
Part of me was kind of thinking, is Jason going to kill one of these kids? Like, can they actually do that?
He does hang around their cabin for a while, like outside and inside, but he never ends up hurting any of them.
I reckon given time, though, he probably could have. If he was there for a bit longer, I don't think it's kind of beyond him, yeah?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge. They did put Tommy in danger in part 4, so...
But they do definitely kind of allude to the fact that maybe he might not hurt them. Maybe he does have some kind of moral code, for use of a better term. Like, does Jason have a moral code? Like, I've never thought that he does, but maybe he does. Maybe brutally murdering, a 7 or 8 year old child is kind of beyond him a little bit.
I don't think it would match this film, though, that is trying to go a bit more towards that comedic edge.
So everyone's kind of dead. Sissy and Paula are kind of being killed from the camp, and we're starting to set up like our final showdown about now, aren't we? Like, although we haven't, Tommy and Megan were pulled over by Sheriff Garrus Garris as well. And despite Megan's alibi that she was with Tommy, Sheriff Garris actually does not believe him to be innocent and arrests him again. But then he goes back to the camp to investigate. Meanwhile, like, Sheriff Garris is like freaking out at this stage. Like, he knows something's kind of up. Jason is back and it's all gone to shit again, and changing the name of the town wasn't good enough. Now we're Camp Crystal Lake all of a sudden, even though he wants to be Camp Forest Green. But as Tommy and Megan develop a ruse to actually trick the watching deputy and escape, Jason actually kills Garris and two other deputies when they actually arrive at the camp to try and, protect the children and try and help out in any way they kind of can. So we're getting towards the end of the film now where Jason is actually about to kill Megan. He actually captures her momentarily when Tommy actually calls to him from the lake and kind of pulls him away.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent sequence. The whole fact that Tommy and Megan are kind of still at the station, so the police are investigating. So, that gives Jason a few people to off, I guess, while he's waiting for Tommy to show up. A few, classic methods, I guess, for Jason. He's got that dead eye shot when he throws that dart right into that copper's forehead. He picks up the other one and crushes his head. We've seen him do that before, so doing some of his greatest hits, as it were. But with Sheriff Garris, I felt bad for him. He got in a tussle with Jason there, and Jason, bends him in half backwards. And, I felt so bad. I like Sheriff Garris.
Yeah, I like Sheriff Garris too, and I think there would have been room for maybe some subsequent kind of appearances in future films, because without giving the game away, kids, but this is the last time we're going to see Tommy Jarvis. He's not in any more Friday the 13th films. He's been in 3 films now, and this is his last appearance. Now, I have no idea what the future films hold. They might have some recurring characters. I hope they do, that we can kind of connect with a little bit, but I think Sheriff Garris would have been a good foe. He had some energy about him. He was a good actor, and I think he kind of presented himself really well. But it's a shame they kind of killed him off, and they didn't really kill him off in a very monumental kind of way either. You know what I mean?
I know. It was just brutal, and you're like, oh, well, that sucks.
It totally just sucks, and it just happened. But anyway, it is what it is. So as we said, Tommy calls to Jason from the lake, and apparently Jason kind of remembers Tommy, so he actually goes after him instead and leaves Megan behind. Now, I actually didn't mind this sequence where Tommy's actually attacked in a boat in the middle of the lake, and actually ties a boulder. He's got this ginormous boulder wrapped in chains. He also somehow sets a fire around the boat as well to add to greater kind of cinematic effect. And Jason and Tommy get into a back and forth.
They're both in the water, and at one point you think Jason's maybe drowned or something, so Megan has to get in there as well and sort of, get that chain around Jason's neck so it can be dragged down to the bottom of the lake. And they ultimately prevail, and, they do the whole thing, is Tommy dead? Did he drown? No, we, coughs up some water, and that's the end.
You forgot to mention the boat-activated motor that Megan turns on that actually goes into Jason's neck. It's gross, man.
Oh, the sound effect on it, that Foley of the snap.
I thought, oh my, look. And they actually had some pretty cool, underwater photography as well of this thing kind of spinning. And you didn't really see much, but you could tell what was kind of happening. And I thought, that's brutal, man. That's totally brutal.
It really is. I liked it. It was a very good climax.
It was a good climax. I thought the whole fight in the boat and the fire and underwater tussle and him, Tommy getting pulled away and all that kind of stuff was interesting. But you're right. We're at the end of the film now, and essentially Jason has been attached to this boulder underneath the water, and Jason kind of just stares off into the water, awaiting an opportunity to return.
Yeah, his eye opens and you're like, maybe he's not dead down there.
Will he return? You tell me.
Well, we're only at part 6, so yeah.
No.
All right, shall we check out remaining clips?
Let's do the last few clips, definitely.
So we do have Court and Nikki going at it.
Nice.
You gotta keep it up to the end of the song.
I'm a slugger.
It's only 10 more minutes.
It's only 10 more minutes.
Only 10 more minutes. Nice.
And then, of course, I had to get the line about taking a dump.
Hey, Nicky, what are you doing back there? Taking a dump?
Obsessed, I tell you. They are obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I've got this random moment where Megan answers the phone at the sheriff's station.
Sheriff's office. Oh, I'm sorry. He can't come to the phone right now. He's in the can draining his lizard. May I take a message? Oops, here he comes now. Please hold.
Oh, man, that's great. I forgot about that line. That's a good one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. We've got Tommy getting a little jive talk, I guess.
Cool.
That's it. Come on, maggot head. Come on. Come on, maggot head. That's it. Come on.
Maggot head. What's up? Seriously.
Offensive. Fine, I will come then.
Yeah.
To hell with you.
Oh, poor Jason, always lured by Tommy. I wonder who he's supposed going to be in the next film.
And the last one I got is that little girl, Nancy. I just thought this was just weird the way she said this.
Is he killed?
Is he killed?
The fact that they had children being, stalked by Jason, it was just, oh my God. I kept thinking, are they going to kill these kids? I hope not,
And, yeah, that's all our clips.
Nice.
All right, so we're at the end. What do you think? Ratings? Recommend?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think this is a good one. I was actually thinking the whole Friday the 13th series has a bit of a Star Trek thing. Remember how we spoke about this folklore about like the even numbers of Star Trek being good and the odd ones not being so good? Well, the same thing is kind of happening with Friday the 13th so far. For me personally, 2, 4, and 6 are probably my favorite ones in the whole series. 1, 3, and 5. However, they are okay. Certainly are not my favorites. 2, 4, and 6 are kind of good. I do enjoy this one. I think Tom McLaughlin's energy and the writing that he kind of brings to it. I loved all the references to like Sissy and Carpenter and Karloff, and I loved all that kind of stuff and all the little Easter eggs that they kind of had for like the true horror guys to really kind of, latch onto. I really thought that was a really interesting filmmaking. I thought it was fun. I liked the small town mentality. I love the fact that you actually got to know some of the characters. I liked Jason's menace throughout the film. He was bold and kind of brave. Yeah, I really did genuinely enjoy this film. It's not a stone cold all time as good as it gets classic, but I think Tom McLaughlin did the best he could do under the circumstances. I mean, I think the thing that this whole series does lack a little bit is some genuine A-grade continuity. Like, as much as it's great to have Tommy Jarvis kind of in these 3 films, it's a bit weird that he's played by 3 different actors. Like, I'm surprised that, John Shepherd couldn't have been convinced to come back for another film. Not saying that I wanted him to. I mean, I think the guy that plays the new guy is pretty good, but you almost have to take each film on its own kind of merits because they both have, positives and negatives. But I do think this is a good film. I would recommend it. I'm going to give this 7 Tommies out of 10. That's kind of where I'm at. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I mean, there's not much else I can say. I kind of agree with everything you just said. And I might give it just a little bit higher. I'm going to go 7.5 Resurrections.
Nice.
All right, so next week we will be moving on to Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
What's going on? We're jumping to 1988. They didn't make a film in 1987.
I know.
They skipped a year. So does that mean I should expect quality? I hope so.
Don't hold your breath.
Find out next week.
Yeah, find out what the new blood is.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
All right, so for more great podcasts, guys, head on over to goldenspiralmedia.com/iTunes. Join us on Facebook. We are at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast and on Twitter at rewatchpod. And we really appreciate your rate and review. You can find us on any podcast app of your choice. All right, Nathan, thank you for joining me as always. And that just leaves me to say, until next time, wherever the red dot goes, you bang.
And I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
Golden Spiral Media and the Rewatch podcast are not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended.
They were making love while that young boy drowned.
The use of any and all copyrighted material is solely for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes, as provided in United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use.
It's gonna take more than a poke in the ribs to put down this old dog.
Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
Cool, JJ. Parents really came through.
Copyright 2017, Golden Spiral Media.
You're a dead meat, slime bag.